I'm out here in Leicester. I should say I have grave concerns here in Leicester. This is an audio overdub, and this is kind of an unusual collection of clips, since in Leicester the main thing is Richard III, and since it is essentially grave related, I captured a bunch of stuff related to that. And here I'm at the visitor center. They call it the Richard III Visitor Center, which really that needs a rebranding. That's kind of a crummy name because it's really a pretty cool museum, as you can see. They've made quite a deal about him being found in the parking lot those many years ago, not so long ago, maybe 10 or 12 years. Let's see, it's 2024. I think there's a timeline with it, but this is all in recent history, all in the last 10 or 15 years, long enough for them to have built this museum on the site where they found his bones. So that was a parking lot, but it had been a Greyfriars Abbey where he was known to be buried, and so some archaeologists followed their research and hunch and found him, and as you can see, they've got this. That's the actual original spot where they dug him up, encased in glass. This is the shroud that they used when they reinterred him, which is rather nice looking, I think. I really found the whole museum to be pretty nice, nicely laid out, nice exhibits, artistically done, and nicely presented. Like even the stone, the way they've lit it around the corners, they've really given the whole place, a kind of a mood that suits the topic. And so they've tried, I think, also to reestablish his true person and compare it to the myth, since he's considered quite the villain because of Shakespeare. But he was the last English king to die in battle. He died fairly young. He was certainly ambitious, but he doesn't seem to have been this kind of mad, conniving person that he's made out to be in Shakespeare. There's a beautiful reproduction of the ancient throne. They've got projections, as you can see, and nice recreated tapestries with maps and really nicely designed stuff. A little cartoonish, but looks cool, I think. It's suitable for the place. Let's try to show you all the different battles across England and the different kings that took part in them. Richard III, which, of course, is the centerpiece of this whole thing. He died at the Battle of Bosworth. And I'm not much for following royal family stuff. I find that quite convoluted and massive. You really have to be into it, and I think you have to also have an inclination towards genealogy. You want to follow these patterns of who begot who's the father and mother, and this line of succession, and when did it split, and all of that stuff. And I do find it interesting here and there, and I do know some kings, but it's maybe somebody out there is much more into, I'm sure, people would be attracted to this topic, would be into lines of succession and royal genealogy. But I just kind of, showed this visually here just so you had a sense of what this place looked like and the kind of stuff that it contained. I didn't realize I was kind of going in and out like this. This is because I'm just sort of hand holding it, and it does make quite a difference, I have to say. My device that I use to compensate for a bounce, my little handy Steadicam, does quite a good job, because as I'm seeing footage Without it, it's pretty shaky. But yeah, so I just do a quick run through here in the visitor center before moving on, because there are multiple sites or points of interest related to Richard III in Leicester. So it looks like Leicester, but it's pronounced Leicester. And being from New England, I'm used to that kind of thing, where Worcester, for example, is spelled similarly, but it's pronounced Worcester. So you encounter that a lot, and that's a little bit annoying, I have to say, because sometimes the pronunciation is very counterintuitive and ridiculous, and I find that the respect doesn't go in the opposite direction. So, for example, the town of Derby is pronounced Derby, D-A-R-B-Y, Derby in Derbyshire. Now I'm inside the church, by the way. But the word Derby, D-A-R-B-Y, by itself, if someone was named Derby, they would pronounce it Derby. So there's a lot of inconsistencies like that. And when I say that they don't respect foreign pronunciations, I'm thinking of Belvoir in particular. Like my hotel in Leicester was on Belvoir, and they don't pronounce that Belvoir. They have a lot of Belvoir streets and a lot of Belvoir Castle, and that's clearly a French word. It's clearly pronounced Belvoir, and they pronounce it Beaver, which I think is ridiculous. But that's what it is. So, if you slightly mispronounce a British term, they kind of jump all over you, which I think they lose some credibility with the word Belvoir on that topic. So in the Leicester Cathedral here, there's a lot of graves, a lot of memorial stones in the floor, on the walls, and I'm just trying to capture a few here. And I'm doing the overdub because I didn't say anything in the church. I don't really like narrating in real time, but as you can see, these are really beautiful and ornate 18th century stones. I think there's some 17th century in here. Some of this has been graffitied on. Here we are seeing stuff about 1609. But that's very medieval script, a little hard to read, but nice. Hey Rick. Some of these people are going to be related to the Guild. There's a 1589 death there. You may want to pause it and take a look at some of that, because that is fairly readable if you pause on it and stare at it for a while. Decent looking cathedral though, pretty nice, and kind of under renovation outside. We'll also see that later. 1730, George Bent. Remade stained glass, obviously that's modernist looking stained glass. Looks like 20th century to me. Well, yeah, these in 1638, these internal church graves they're pretty beautiful. So I'm not sure if the bodies are nearby these stones or if they're in the churchyard, because that churchyard has gone through a lot. That there used to be a much more vast churchyard there, and they moved most of the stones to a cemetery in the city, but maybe a mile and a half away. And there's just a handful of stones in the churchyard now. So these look like they've always been inside the church. But where they have the bodies exactly, I'm not sure. And they have multiple memorials in the wall. It's hard to know where these people are. But these are just beautiful with these family crests, these symbols of heraldry. Here we see some very worn carvings in the floor. So that's quite often, like if you go to churches in the Netherlands, you go to these older churches, the floors are just all stones, all tombstones. And here we have Richard III reinterred. So that reproduction skeleton that we saw is essentially what's in here, the real thing, with his curved spine from scoliosis. And they've given him his proper burial. So that's a nice romantic story of this, the life of this king, last to die in battle, immortalized in plays, and then rediscovered and reinterred. Pretty great ceiling there, lots of beautiful wood carvings, gold leaf, colorful banners. It's got a lot going on. It's got a lot going for it. But the external grounds are still heavily under renovation, exterior, and there's all these kinds of fences and stuff. So it's a little annoying when you're trying to get a look at the cathedral on the outside. But obviously that'll pass. So not a very long life, 33 years. Little bouquet says July 1st, 1483. So I was there in July, and that was to commemorate his coronation, the anniversary of his coronation. So as you can see, people are still quite interested in actively commemorating and pursuing knowledge about him. Well, that's the thing, you can take any subject and focus on it, and that can become a really great nexus point for you to explore a time period and all of the things that are related to it. I think this whole set here just looks fantastic with these angels. These kinds of guardians on this altar. This ornate tapestry design. It's quite a beautiful chapel inside the church. Statuary. Now we're getting into more modern stones and plaques with much more of a typeset look to the font, to the typeface. It indicates more of an industrial or post-industrial look, as opposed to this one in front of me that's much more calligraphic. Look at those gorgeous carvings. Hard to find a year on that one. Like it's commemorating some mass 35 poor boys. It's a mass grave, 1609. And it is a little odd the way, they've got some of this modern furniture on top of gravestones and whatnot. A little odd, but is you can see it's an actively used church. Interesting mix though too with those radiators, those steel radiators for heat also. So lots of different time periods represented here. Even those are kind of antique now. (1806) for William Hodges. A Russian icon kind of showing up randomly. Some killed in action. 1917, that's a World War I memorial. Doesn't look like it. Fanny Flood, 1950. Sometimes things are made to look older than they are. 1809 on the top. Beautiful carvings here. Apostles. Look at all the animal symbols on the bottom. Somewhat older stained glass. I'm not sure who that's supposed to portray. Okay, again, more calligraphic, 1743, next to the ministers here from the 20th century. Samuel Simpson, 1738, and his wife, 1795, Elizabeth. There they are again on the bottom. Walkers. I don't know why I'm so close here. Maybe trying to get around something. Dove of Peace. William Walker, Knight. Like it was in the late 1800s. Again, heraldry, little dragon on the top. It's an odd symbol, looks like a homemaker. Latin, 1604, 1638. Some of the stones on the floor, again, so is what I'm talking about with furniture being placed over them and just being incorporated into the function, and in some cases blocked outright by these benches. (1814) for this beautiful figure posing on an urn. Craddock, 1759. Obviously to be buried, memorialized inside the church, 1698. George Urvukes, that's a tough name, but yeah, you had to be somewhat prominent to be memorialized in the church. We've got an organ. This is free to visit this place, by the way. Whenever I go to a free place like this, I try to buy something in the gift shop as a way of support, because they do always take donations, and I think, well, let me buy some of your merchandise. And I did buy some stuff here, but they could have had better. I really like that. Very subtle carving on that dark stone. That's very unusual to see that light figure on a dark ground. It's like a Rembrandt or something, but in carving. Kind of an arts and crafts, medieval revival, stained glass. These figures, again, the radiators to the left, but yeah, these figures seem to be fairly featured in their brochures and stuff. They have close-ups of those carvings. Those might be a bit exceptional. I'm not sure who the artist is. Again, 18th century markers here. And they go up quite high that you can't really even read anything way up there. I like that one on the left that's meant to look like a scroll. An unfurled scroll. Very ship looking with these carvings. Look like the prow of a ship. Beautiful old flags, banners. Fantastic. The whole thing comes together. Create a great aesthetic. It's overwhelming, of course. So many images and symbols and carvings and writings and colors and materials. St. George and the Dragon, always easily recognized. A little list of foreign wars there. Beautiful characters and the details, even the name of the sculptors, Lindley and Fern. And now I'm outside the cathedral, and across from it you can see here, plainly labeled the Guildhall, which also is free to visit. And sadly, when I went there, the main Guildhall was being used for a meeting, so I couldn't get in the main Guildhall. But I do get into some of these lesser ones, and you have a sense of the aesthetic with this exposed timber frame buildings, what we call in Germany Fachwerk, and a lot of that kind of settling. You can see how crooked everything is now. So this is the courtyard. Leicester Cathedral in the background now. And now inside one of the halls. Interesting stained glass where most of it's clear, but then you've got the colored glass on the border and an interior symbol. And this ornate mantelpiece. A lot of this stuff reminds me of the Netherlands, actually. It all has a kind of a Dutch feel. The colorfulness, the carvings, the stones in the church floor, the date 1637. There's a lot of stuff in Amsterdam, for example, from this time period that looks similar. And even these characters with their collars, which I think are called piccadillies, these ruffled collars. 1586, look at that beautiful carving. Fantastic item. 1637 on this one. I do talk a little bit here, and I do say the names of the figures. The thistle, symbol from Scotland. I mean, if you saw anything like this in an antique shop, you would be impressed. Again, when you see these things just sort of one after the other, they really start to pile up, but these are exceptional items. Hayrick. A little tough with the reflection of the stained glass in the background, but there we see 1623 now. And we just saw, if you go back to the cathedral right at the very beginning, in the first few minutes, there were some Hayrick stones. This is a reproduction of some torture device. Displaying, public display of the bodies of the guilty. Not very nice, but I thought interesting. This is like a legal library section. So these are the guild masters, you know, this is like the Hanseatic League. These are the heads of trade, the merchants associations and craftspeople, moneymakers. Probably a later Hayrick. I don't know. I don't think I got his name down there. Oh, no, I just missed it. I don't know. Another thistle. They seem to just put thistles on things as a symbol of don't touch this. I don't know why I zoomed in on it. I think I was just trying to use it for a fade out. But obviously it's just kind of a mess here. That camera doesn't do very well on close-ups. And now, finally, outside the cathedral, this pose of Richard III in battle where, you know, Shakespeare has him saying, "A horse, my kingdom for a horse," like he's a coward and he's trying to escape. But really he died in battle, and there's no indication that he was trying to abandon his men. Something else that they forensically studied once they found his bones, of course, is how exactly did he die, and what does that indicate about the battle. Now the remnants of the churchyard, and you can see, of course, all this scaffolding and fencing in the background, so it's a bit of a hodgepodge here.
Johnson, nephew of John Johnson. I believe I saw John in the cathedral. 1856. Ruth Elizabeth. Rhoda, wife of John Kendall, 1833. Mourning urn.
These are 19th century stones. Not so unusual, but I just wanted to give you the full experience. To the left is the visitor center, so it's all in one area. His body wasn't found far from the cathedral. Overgrown, you can't get in there. And I enjoyed Leicester as a city. It had its rough elements, but it was clean. It was Disneyland clean. They keep those sidewalks super clean. It's quiet. It's a small city. Everything closes at 6 o'clock except for the restaurants and bars. But it's a great central hub for exploring this area. It's 1 hour direct train from London. Not cheap. I want to say the train ride was €100. It was like 80 pounds. It was like $100 round trip between Paddington and Leicester Station. And once you're up there, if you want to go to any little town, it's going to cost you at least £15 for a round trip to go to, say, Nottingham or Stamford or whatever. Most of them are more than that. Birmingham, whatever it is, Sheffield, anything in that surrounding area. And I used it to go to some of these smaller places like Stamford, where you can get out to Burley House, which was fantastic. But it's just, London is so expensive and chaotic. It was nice. I got a fantastic hotel for a third the price of what I would have paid in London. So I was up there for a good, 7 nights, I think. And it was just nice to have a place to relax and get out of the chaos and expensive London. But, you want to see London, you go to London. But I'd done enough of London, and I wanted to start exploring the countryside. I'd also gone up into the Peak District to see Haddon Hall, and some of that will be showing up. I did take some video up there. There were actually a lot of homeless and or drug addicts hanging out in this little remnant of the cemetery. And I do sort of apologize to them because I'm filming and I don't want to invade people's privacy or make them think I'm coming after them in any way, of course, because most of them that were here were just kind of strung out on benches.